Hello, here's a beautiful cake that I recently made.
Well, today we're making this cake, and it was simple and easy to make, and follow along and I'll show you exactly how I made it.
We start with buttercream, and these are the ingredients that you'll use: butter, powdered sugar, vanilla, and salt. First, you add the butter to your mixing bowl, and that's 4 sticks of butter, which makes a good amount to frost the inside and outside of a cake. And I'm making a 6-inch cake. I think it's 4 layers, 5 layers maybe. So it was a perfect amount. You start with your butter, and then I added a teaspoon of vanilla and a teaspoon of salt. I'll also add a little bit of water as the butter is stirring, mixing around just to get it softened. I really spent a lot of time mixing my butter because that's the most important part, is I want the butter to be really creamy. It is called buttercream after all. So you scrape down the sides of your bowl, add more water if needed, but this was a good time. It was pretty loose, so I added half of the amount of my powdered sugar. It's a 2-pound bag. If you are doing 4 sticks of butter, you obviously could cut that recipe in half if you didn't need that much, but I always like to be on the safe side and have plenty rather than run out. So after I add half of my bag of powdered sugar, I let it mix for a while, and I'll spend some time scraping down the side of the bowl to make sure I get all of that off the side. Add more water. Now, instead of water, you also could substitute milk or heavy cream, but I like to use water. I think it cuts down on the calories a little bit of the buttercream. And I love the flavor of it once it's done. So here I am just scraping down the sides again. Now I'm adding the remaining powdered sugar into the recipe. And I'll post the recipe, of course, in the notes on this so you can see exactly what the recipe was. But it's a really good recipe and easy to make. So I'll spend a little time just letting it mix in the remaining powdered sugar that's around the side. It's a good time to add more water if you feel like it's necessary to loosen it up a little bit. But when I add powdered sugar, I always start my mixer on slow speed and then let it build up to a faster speed just to make sure the powdered sugar doesn't fly back out of the bowl and get all over the place. So this is the end of mixing it. After you feel like it's come to a nice consistency, you'll also see that the butter will have turned whiter. So it was yellow when we started, but as we added the powdered sugar, now the buttercream has become white. And that's the look of our buttercream. And now we're ready to decorate. So I like to use piping bags. And this is a round piping tip. It's a 1A. You can get that from Michael's or your cake supply store. I also have large plastic bags that I use for decorating. I'm using just a tall cylinder glass pitcher to actually put my piping bag into so that I can spoon my buttercream directly into the piping bag very easily. And using the piping bag, it just helps you to create smooth and consistent amount of buttercream between each layer on the top and also on the sides of the cake. And that's the next step that I'll show you as I use my piping bag. It's not something it's required to do, but I like using it, and I feel like it just gives me more structure and uniformity. So that's why I use it. So once you finish that, you want to just kind of tie your top down or squeeze it so that it doesn't come out the top when you're actually using it, of course. Now, I do use a little bit of tape. Today I'm using some strong tape so that my cake board doesn't move around as I'm decorating my cake. I made my cakes last night, and then I went ahead and let them cool for about a half hour and then wrapped them in plastic wrap and refrigerated them overnight. These are tall cakes, but I've decided just to cut them in half. So obviously it's going to be a 6-layer cake because I do have 3 cakes that I made, 3 6-inch round cakes. So when we stack them, it's going to come out to be 6 layers. So of course I'm using my serrated knife to kind of just mark the sides of the cake as I turn my turntable. And once I get a mark on the outside, then I go ahead and start slipping my knife into the middle of the cake so it can actually now cut the layer in half. And as soon as you're done with your cake, slicing all your layers, just put them off on the side. And now you're ready to start decorating. Of course, you want to peel off any parchment that was on the bottom of those layers. And then I always put a little bit of buttercream. I like to clean up my crumbs first before I move on to decorating, just so I don't accidentally get any crumbs on the cake. But I put a little buttercream on the cake board just to hold that cake in place as I decorate. I can pound it down just a little bit just so it really gets in there. And then I start adding my buttercream between the layers. And I do take a little spatula and I just kind of smooth it down just a bit. Again, this is a good time that you could add fruit to the middle here, or preserves, or even, even a different buttercream, chocolate and vanilla buttercream could go between those layers. It's really your choice. Again, you're adding just your buttercream as needed, giving a little smooth down. I know that this is going to be for my daughter and her family and myself and my family. And we don't like a lot of buttercream, so I'm trying to be as thin on the layer of buttercream as possible, with it still showing, and you get a good piece of buttercream in the middle, but not an excessive amount. I feel like most people know that it's a lot of buttercream, throughout the cake and on the outside of the cake. So we try to not overfill our cakes so it can be good and not too excessive. And as I put each layer down, I'm checking to make sure that they're sitting right on top of the next cake, and that makes it easier when you're frosting the outside of the cake. If you've started to put your layers on crooked, then it becomes, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it's hard to come back from that. So you definitely want to be careful of that. Now, if I was taking this cake somewhere, traveling with it, driving it somewhere, I probably would add some skewers into the cake, since it is a tall cake, and that would help it to not slide or move. But the party is actually going to be at my house, so I will not be taking it anywhere, and it'll just sit here. Once I finish the cake, I'll probably chill it for a little while and then bring it out right before the guests arrive for the party. So I'm finishing the buttercream now on top of the cake and smoothing it down. Again, remembering just that keeping it minimal. Now this cake is going to be decorated on the top with flowers. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time really making the top of the cake perfectly smooth, because I don't need to. I can leave it just the way it is and it'll be fine. I'll add my buttercream, and this piping bag makes it really easy to add buttercream onto the sides of the cake. And instead of using a spatula to get it on the side of the cake and having to hopefully add the correct amount to the sides, the piping bag really helps, and the tip that I'm using helps to get just the right amount onto the side. Now the side is going to have a textured effect on the side. If you watched my last video, I had attempted to do it on the small 1-tier 6-inch round cake, and it just didn't turn out looking good, so I made it a comb effect instead. But these taller cakes look really good with this textured spatula effect, is what we always called it. And we did hundreds of these cakes with that design. We sold that to many brides and grooms for their wedding cakes. And you'll see it here in just a moment. I'm really just smoothing out the side right now so that everything is pretty even as we get started before we start making the indentions. Here, I'm just finishing up, making it a smooth. I saw some pieces that were missing a little bit of frosting, so I added a little bit more frosting. And then now I'm just re-smoothing out the cake. Many times people will do just a crumb coat on their cake, and then they'll chill their cake before they add the second coat of buttercream on it. Again, since this is a very informal birthday cake just for my daughter and our family, I've decided not to spend that much time on it. It doesn't need to be perfect. And so therefore, I'm not going to chill the cake. In between those layers, I've made a final look on it, a final layer on it, and it's ready really for design now. I do clean my cake board at this point, just remove any buttercream that's on the cake board, because obviously I want the prettiest presentation possible for the cake. And we are now finished and ready to start making our design of the cake. So I'm using just a spatula, and I just use it pressed up against the cake, and I turn the cake round table. The turntable really does all the work. The turntable and the spatula that I'm holding in my hands. When you turn the cake and you start removing portions of icing, then you want to just scrape off your spatula into a bowl so it doesn't accumulate too much on your spatula. You want a clean spatula each time you go around. When you're doing this, if you notice that you've removed too much buttercream from a certain area, you can certainly add some more on. I did buy these flowers, and I'm going to be using these flowers on our cake. So now I'm just cutting the flowers to the length that I think I need them to be, and I'm just placing them into a little vase there of water. The flowers are fresh flowers. Before we insert them into the cake, though, we do spend some time placing them into straws so that the straw can enter the cake, and we don't actually have the flower stem going directly into the cake. So you'll see here, I'm just cutting these down, removing any greenery that's low on the stem because we don't need a lot of greenery, and I don't usually put greenery into the cake. I try to limit that. So if you don't have straws, you don't have to. I definitely have placed flowers into cakes before, many wedding cakes, and it didn't have the straws, and it's perfectly fine. The only reason why we place the straws into the cake is to avoid any pesticides that may have been placed on the flowers to enter the cake. So that's the precaution, and that's the reason for the straws. Now I'm just inserting the straws into the cake, and I'm just doing a very natural design with the flowers on top of the cake. And many brides would give us pictures of exactly what they wanted their flowers to look like, where they wanted them arranged, and we would follow those pictures. I'm just doing these freestyle. I don't have a picture that I'm going by. I just picked this bouquet because I like the colors of the flowers, and now I'm just randomly inserting them into the cake. And you may have a preference. You may decide to do all red roses along the edge of the cake, or maybe their favorite color is yellow and you want to just do all yellow flowers. It's really the choices are unlimited, and you really can make any design. Now, I could have stopped here, but I decided that I wanted to do a little something on the sides, the front and the sides of the cake. And so I've taken some of the extra flowers that I have there, and now I'm pressing them into the side of the cake. And I have to turn it just to re-look at it because I can't necessarily see it from my vantage point where I'm standing. So that's why I'm turning it so I can see where flowers are needed. This is always kind of a challenge for me because I could keep going and going and going, taking some out, removing, rearranging, adding more, removing some, etc. But you have to decide, when enough is enough and when it's good as it's going to get. So it was a fun cake to make, and I think it turned out really pretty. I will be finishing it up here in just a moment, and I know that she'll love it. And that's all we want, is to make people happy. And this is a simple and small thing that anybody can do. I can assure you it's very easy to do. And flowers make every cake look special and beautiful. So this is really the end of the cake. And I have a few more pictures for you, how it turned out. At the end there, I actually purchased a little sign that says happy birthday. That's electronic, and I'll be putting that on the very top of the cake. You also could have put a little hump of buttercream on the very top if you wanted the flowers to be a little bit more elevated in the middle. But again, like I said, this was going to be a freestyle, natural looking, and I chose not to do that. Chose them all to be rather flat. And that's it. Now it has the happy birthday sign, and I think it turned out beautiful. I was happy with it. And it is a salted caramel cake. I forgot to mention that. I used a salted caramel flavor to go inside the cake, and it's going to taste wonderful. It's beautiful. It's perfect. Now all we have to do is wait for the birthday girl to arrive. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.